It began with the sound of stone breathing. Beneath the whisper of the hedges, the gardener felt the pulse of something ancient echo through the roots. The moon hung low, pale as old bone, washing the statues in a ghostly shimmer. Every leaf trembled, though no wind stirred. He tried to tell himself it was a trick of mist and sleeplessness, yet the hiss came again. Closer, as if from the marble mouths themselves. He gripped his lantern tighter. The light wavered, and so did his courage. A statue of a knight, once still beside the fountain, now faced him directly, sword raised. His breath caught. He had trimmed the ivy from its arm that very afternoon. The air smelled of iron and rain. Somewhere deep in the dark, a woman's voice sighed. "Do not look away." The lantern flickered out, and only the statue's eyes gleamed faintly white. Who walked before dawn if no one survived the night? At dawn, the garden looked unchanged. Every statue silent, unmoving, innocent in its stillness. Yet, the gardener's mind could not rest. His footprints from the night before were gone, erased by dew. He examined the knight's pedestal. Small grooves in the earth, fresh, as though the heavy marble had shifted its weight. He forced a laugh that sounded hollow in the mist and turned toward the manor. From an upper window, Lady Eleanor watched, her eyes veiled behind lace curtains. When he met her gaze, she stepped back, vanishing into the dim interior. Inside the tool shed, the gardener sharpened his shears, trying to drown the memory of stone hissing in the dark. The air reeked of iron and damp wood. Every creak of the door made him glance over his shoulder. When the steward entered, he nearly jumped. The old man's voice was flat, but his eyes trembled with something unspoken. "Best you stay out of the gardens after sundown," he said. "Some things don't rest easy here." That night, the bell in the chapel rang once, though no hand pulled its rope. The sound rolled across the grounds like a warning. Edric stood at his window, watching mist swallow the hedges. Far below, a pale figure drifted between the statues, too tall to be the boy, too graceful for any mortal stride. He leaned closer, heart hammering, but when lightning flashed, the garden was empty. Sleep abandoned him. Near midnight, he took his lantern again and stepped into the garden. The rain had stopped, yet puddles shimmered like liquid silver. Every statue glistened wet, alive in the reflection. Somewhere beyond the fountain, a faint scraping echoed. He followed the sound, trembling. The mist parted, revealing the night statue now kneeling before the weeping woman. Their stone hands almost touched. He whispered to no one, "What do you want from me?" The morning came veiled in a pale haze, the scent of wet stone thick in the air. Edric worked silently among the thorned rose hedges, his hands raw from pruning. Yet every snip of the shears echoed strangely, returning like whispers through the mist. The steward's voice broke the stillness. "The lady wishes to see you." Edric straightened, heart tightening. Inside the manor, Lady Eleanor stood beside a window draped in gauze, light falling across her silver hair. "You heard them, didn't you?" she said quietly. He hesitated, unsure if she accused or confessed. Her eyes shone with unspoken dread. "Promise me you will not tend the western garden tonight." That afternoon, as he trimmed ivy from the chapel wall, Thomas approached, his small frame shadowed by the statue-lined path. "They spoke to me," the boy whispered. "The stone man said the garden remembers." Edric knelt, forcing a gentle smile, but inside his pulse raced. "You were dreaming, lad," he said. Thomas shook his head. "Then why do they move only when we look away?" The boy's words lingered long after he left, carried by the wind that smelled faintly of marble dust. As dusk approached, the steward barred the garden gate and crossed himself when he thought no one watched. "The lady keeps her ghosts well fed," he muttered under his breath. Edric lingered by the fountain, unable to leave. The first owl cried, and the statues seemed to lean toward the sound. He placed his hand against the knight's cold arm. The chill sank deep into his skin, spreading like frost. A strange warmth answered beneath the marble, a pulse, faint but alive. He recoiled, breath shallow. When night fell, thunder rolled far beyond the hills. Inside the manor, Lady Eleanor walked barefoot through the grand hall, her gown whispering like silk on stone. She paused before an enormous painting. A family gathered around a sculptor, each face eerily familiar to the statues outside. Her trembling fingers brushed over her own likeness in the portrait, frozen beside the same fountain where Edric now worked. "Forgive us," she whispered, her reflection trembling in the cracked varnish. Later, unable to obey her warning, Edric slipped once more into the garden. The rain had ceased, leaving the world glistening. He followed the path toward the western edge where no birds sang. The statues there were older, rougher, pitted with age, their faces half-worn. Among them, he saw a new one. A boy carved in pale stone, his mouth parted mid-whisper. His heart froze. It was Thomas. Edric staggered back, the lantern trembling in his grip as faint hissing rose from every corner of the garden. Dawn crawled pale across the drenched estate. Edric hadn't slept. His thoughts circled the boy's marble eyes, that silent scream preserved in stone. He stormed to the manor, demanding answers. The steward met him in the hall. His voice brittle as frost. "There was no boy," he insisted. "No Thomas ever worked here." The words cut deep, unreal. Edric ran to the servants' quarters, an empty bed, dust where small feet once stood. Yet a child's cap lay on the pillow, damp as if from rain. The lady's voice echoed faintly from her chambers. "The garden takes what remembers." By midday, Edric stood again among the statues. He counted them one by one, whispering the numbers as though to anchor himself to reason. Each face seemed subtly altered, eyes tilted, lips parted in new expressions of grief or rage. Beneath the fountain's basin, he discovered a name etched faintly into the stone. Thomas. A cold wind passed, carrying the scent of wet roses and decay. When he looked up, the lady stood across the lawn, watching him with a sorrow that seemed centuries old. That evening, the lady invited him to her study. The fire burned low, shadows writhing on ancient walls. "These gardens were not planted for beauty," she confessed. "They are a boundary." Her eyes lifted toward the ceiling, voice trembling. "My ancestor, the sculptor, bound the restless souls of his kin in stone to preserve them, but the seal weakens each century." Edric felt the floor tilt beneath him. "Then, Thomas," he began. She nodded. "The first to be claimed since my husband." The fire hissed. A crack like splitting stone echoed from beyond the window. Outside, the storm returned. Lightning tore open the sky, revealing for a heartbeat the entire garden moving. Statues turning, arms stretching, faces alive with frozen agony. Edric stumbled to the window, horror gripping him. The lady's reflection stood beside his own, her eyes glowing faintly. "They awaken when called," she whispered, "and they always call back." Her words were drowned by the bell tolling 13 times. An hour that did not exist. When silence fell, Edric could no longer deny the truth. He stepped into the storm, mud clinging to his boots, thunder muttering above. The statues had gathered around the fountain, facing him in a perfect circle. The knight raised his sword. The weeping woman bowed her head. And from between them came a whisper. Thomas's voice, soft as breath. "You should have listened." Lightning struck the fountain, splitting it in two. From the crack within, something stirred. The morning after the storm dawned hollow and gray. The fountain lay cracked in two, its waters drained into black mud. Edric wandered the garden in silence, his boots sinking with every step. Where the night statue once stood, only shattered feet remained. In their place, a trail of marble dust led toward the chapel. Inside, the lady knelt before the altar, her hands red with something darker than wax. She lifted her gaze as he entered, eyes fever bright. "They are waking faster now," she whispered. "The boundary is breaking." The lady told him of the sculptor, her ancestor who sought to make death obedient. Each statue, she said, was once a soul that refused to die, sealed in stone for eternity. As the centuries passed, they grew restless. Every generation they choose another to join them, she said softly. "That is the price of remembrance." Edric's voice broke. "Then why me?" She looked away, trembling. "Because you listened when they called." By nightfall, the steward had vanished. The doors of the manor stood open, swinging in the wind. Edric followed the sound of dragging footsteps through the corridor and out into the rain. Near the hedge maze, he found Harrow, half petrified, his legs turned to gray stone. The old man's eyes still moved, filled with terror. "Run." "They come for breath," he gasped. Then his mouth froze mid-word. Edric stumbled back, lantern slipping from his hand, its flame dying in the mud. Desperation drove Edric to the manor library. He tore through ancient ledgers until his hands were black with dust. There he found sketches of every statue, each paired with a name and a death date. The last entry was blank, except for one word written in a trembling hand. "Gardener." Lightning struck again, shaking dust from the rafters. The lady appeared at the doorway, eyes red from weeping. "You were chosen the moment you set foot on this soil," she said. "You tend the roots of their prison." That night, the garden glowed faintly blue beneath the storm's eye. Edric stepped into the labyrinth one last time, guided by whispers threading through the hedges. The statues no longer hid their movement. They turned openly, following him. At the fountain's ruin stood a figure cloaked in shadow, chisel gleaming like silver bone. The sculptor, unchanged by centuries, looked up and smiled. "You've kept them well," he said, voice like grinding stone. "Now finish what I began." The sculptor's words echoed long after his form dissolved into mist. Edric's breath came shallow as he reached for the broken fountain. The marble was warm to the touch, pulsing faintly like a heart beneath his palm. He staggered back, clutching his wrist. The skin there had hardened, turning pale as ash. Panic flared. He scraped at it, but the stone spread up his arm like frost. From the hedges came a rustling of countless voices, murmuring prayers in forgotten tongues. The statues were no longer silent. He stumbled toward the manor, shouting for the lady, his voice breaking the night's quiet. She appeared at the top of the grand staircase, hair unbound, candle trembling in her hand. When she saw his arm, her face blanched. "It's begun," she whispered. "You've been marked." Her hand touched his cheek, cold, trembling. "There may still be a way. If the final statue is completed before dawn, the curse may bind anew." But her voice faltered. "The final statue must be mine." In the sculptor's old workshop, the air hung heavy with dust and old grief. Marble busts lined the walls, each bearing traces of life too vivid to be art. Edric's hands shook as he gripped the chisel, his fingers stiffening by the second. Lady Eleanor stood before him, serene, her eyes reflecting candlelight. "When the first dawn rises," she said softly, "they will take me instead of you." He wanted to refuse, to flee, yet her calmness anchored him. The curse needed blood and silence. He began to carve. Each strike of the chisel echoed like thunder in the confined space. The lady did not move, her eyes fixed on him, lips whispering prayers. The stone took shape, the fold of her gown, the bend of her neck, until only her gaze remained to be captured. His arm was now fully stone, each breath a struggle. "Stop," she pleaded suddenly, tears streaking her face. "You mustn't finish. If you do, I will not wake again." But his body no longer obeyed him. Something deeper guided the chisel. The final strike fell. Silence consumed the manor. The lady stood motionless, breath gone, eyes still and glassy. Before him stood her perfect likeness, lifelike, eternal. Edric dropped the chisel, the sound distant as a dream. Stone climbed to his chest, freezing his heartbeat mid-throb. The garden outside stirred once more, statues bowing toward the workshop as if in reverence. His last thought was not of fear, but of stillness. That strange peace beneath all horror. As dawn broke, his eyes turned to marble, yet they remained open, facing her forever. The sun rose over the estate like a dying ember, dim and uncertain. Within the workshop, silence reigned. Dust drifted across Edric's stone face, and a faint hum filled the air, as if the statues themselves were whispering his name. Outside, the garden bloomed unnaturally fast. Roses unfurled within moments, vines crept across the manor walls, wrapping the broken fountain in living green. The lady's likeness glowed faintly, veins of gold running through her marble form. The curse had not ended. It had simply changed hands. At noon, the estate stirred again. Master Harrow's half-stone body stood near the chapel door, now fully frozen, yet from his mouth came the sound of slow breathing. Birds circled overhead but refused to land. The air thickened. Heat without warmth. Deep beneath the soil, the sound of chiseling began anew. From the ground near the fountain rose a form cloaked in marble dust. The sculptor, whole once more, his eyes gleaming with the light of creation. He smiled, as though his masterpiece had just begun. In the echoing hall, the statues lining the corridors began to move. Slow, deliberate turns, a hand lifting, a head bowing. From their lips escaped faint sighs, the sound of centuries of silence breaking. The sculptor passed among them like a priest, touching each one with his chisel. Wherever he passed, life flickered within stone. Eyes opened, breath returned, but hearts beat in rhythm with the earth, not their own. The manor trembled, as if the walls themselves remembered pain. In the workshop, the lady's statue cracked down the center, her marble hand shifting slightly. A glow pulsed where her heart once beat. The sculptor entered, kneeling before her creation. "You carried them well," he murmured. "Now rest." But her eyes opened, clear, human once more. And she spoke his name. The sculptor froze, horror dawning across his ancient face. "You were not meant to wake." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Then, you should not have made me so perfectly." The ground beneath the estate shook. Windows shattered. The gardens erupted in vines. Lady Eleanor stepped free from her stone shell, reborn yet pale as moonlight, veins of gold running under her skin. The sculptor staggered backward, shouting words of command that broke against the air. She raised a hand, the same marble grace now living flesh, and every statue turned its face toward him. "You made us prisoners," she said, voice resonant and calm. "Now, let us remember." The statues moved as one, and the sculptor's scream echoed until it became silence. Dawn broke cold and still. Smoke rose from the ruined chapel, its bell silent at last. The air carried a strange peace, heavy, reverent. Lady Eleanor walked through the garden barefoot, her white gown streaked with dust and streaks of gold from her newly living veins. Around her, the statues stood quiet once more, their faces softened into calm expressions, as though finally at rest. She stopped before Edric's likeness, kneeling gently. "You tended what others feared," she whispered, "and so you'll never truly die." The wind carried her words into the hush, and for a moment, his marble eyes seemed to glisten. She returned to the manor halls where vines now crawled through cracked windows and sunlight touched ancient tapestries. The house breathed, no longer haunted, but alive in strange balance. As she passed the portraits of her ancestors, their painted eyes seemed softer, forgiven. The curse had not lifted. It had become something else, a bond of remembrance between the living and the still. The sculptor's chisel lay shattered on the floor, its fragments glimmering like starlight. Outside, the villagers gathered beyond the gates, drawn by the strange glow that lingered above the estate. They found the lady waiting at the entrance, her voice gentle but firm. "The garden will remain closed," she said. "Those within have earned their silence." None dared question her, for behind her stood rows of statues, not of sorrow, but of peace, their eyes lifted toward the light. As the sun climbed, the mist lifted at last, revealing colors unseen for centuries. At twilight, she returned once more to the garden's heart. Fireflies drifted between the statues, tiny sparks among giants. She placed her palm upon Edric's cold hand. "You freed them," she said softly. "And me?" The air shimmered faintly. His fingers twitched, a single, gentle motion. She did not cry, nor look away. Instead, she smiled, the first true smile in years, knowing that some part of him would always walk among the roots and roses. Night descended once more. The manor slept. Beneath the moon, every statue cast a long shadow toward the chapel, as if drawn by memory. The wind whispered through ivy, and somewhere deep below the soil came the echo of distant chiseling. Slow, steady, eternal. The garden would never be silent again, yet neither would it be cursed. Among the still figures, one statue bore eyes that seemed awake, watching over the lady as she slept. The gardener's duty, it seemed, had never ended.